It's August 1940, and for almost a year, Europe has been at war. But Berliners haven't felt the full weight of it. That changes when the RAF bombs the German capital for the first time. The raid is small and barely damages the city. Hitler, humiliated that his capital could be struck, demands a response. One part of that response would change the skyline of Berlin and other German cities forever, and leave behind some of the strangest and most intimidating relics of the war. These were the Flak Towers, immense concrete fortresses designed to not only shoot down Allied bombers from the skies, but also to shelter the citizens of Germany, hospitals, and even priceless works of art. In today's video, we're going to look at German Flak Towers, mostly the ones in Berlin. Even before the war, Germany was worried about air attack. In the late 1930s, the Luftwaffe built an entire belt of flak positions along the western border with France. These sites housed thousands of bunkers for crews, ammunition, and command posts, while the guns themselves were 20mm, 37mm, and of course 88mm guns. Displayed in earthen pits, the thinking was simple: the men and ammunition needed protection, and the guns could be replaced. But the real turning point for the creation of the Flak Towers came in late August 1940. A German bomber formation meant to strike British docks accidentally dropped bombs on London. Churchill retaliated with raids on Berlin. Hitler was furious. Not only was his capital attacked, but his prestige was on the line. In his rage, he ordered the construction of massive concrete fortresses to protect the Reich cities from the air. Construction began at breakneck pace. The first site chosen were in Berlin's Zoo and Friedrichshain and Humboldtine parks. Work crews supplied by the Total organization labored day and night, sometimes with their lights going dark as bombers approached. By May 1941, the first tower at the zoo was already operational. The scale was immense. The zoo tower alone required over 35,000 tons of cement, 78,000 tons of gravel, and 9,200 tons of steel, and 15,000 cubic meters of timbers and scaffolding. These things are some of the largest reinforced concrete structures in Europe. Each site had two main towers: the Gefechtssturm, or G Tower, which was the combat tower, bristling with heavy guns, and the Leitraum, or L Tower, a smaller command tower housing radar and fire control. The G Tower at the Berlin Zoo was a monster, 6 stories tall, 40 meters high, and a massive 70 by 70 meters at the base. Its walls and roofs were up to 3 meters thick. From the outside, they looked like something straight out of a Tolkien novel. Squat medieval castles, but made out of smooth concrete. Inside, though, they were like self-contained cities. Each tower had its own well for water, diesel generators, kitchens, bakeries, and dormitories. During raids, as many as 15,000 civilians could take shelter, though during the final battle for Berlin, some towers were reported to have as many as 40,000 people seek shelter there. One even held a maternity ward, and yes, children were born inside as bombs fell above. They weren't just shelters either. Priceless treasures, like a 3,500-year-old bust of an Egyptian queen, were hidden in secure rooms, along with many others. On the roof sat the real muscle of the Flak Towers, their 128mm guns. Each tower mounted 4 twin-barreled mounts, so 8 in total. These could hurtle a nearly 30-kilogram shell up to 14,800 meters, well into the altitude of the Allied bombers. With radar guidance from the nearby L Tower, the guns could fire coordinated salvos, saturating the sky with deadly bursts of shrapnel. Allied crews often joked that the flak was so thick you could get up and walk on it. Supporting the 128mm guns was a smattering of smaller guns like 37mm and 20mm guns meant for low-flying attackers. I should mention here that there were other variations of the Flak Towers with different batteries. 88mm guns and 105mm guns were also used. With all of this work invested in these massive buildings, I'm sure you have the same question I did when I first researched this subject. Did they actually work? Well, that's hard to judge, so I'll say sort of. The towers definitely made Berlin one of the hardest defended airspaces in the world. The government quarter, positioned in the triangle between the 3 towers, was relatively spared from bombing damage, partly because Allied bomber crews didn't want to get too close. But the numbers tell a different story. Ammunition expenditure was astronomical. By late 1941, German reports showed it could take 16,000 rounds of 88mm shells to bring down one bomber, or 3,000 rounds from the 128s. The Humboldtine Tower was credited with just 32 confirmed kills. In other words, the towers were more psychological and propaganda than a truly war-winning weapon. By 1945, the towers had one last role to play, as fortresses in the Battle of Berlin. As the Red Army closed in, the 128mm guns depressed to ground level and opened fire on Soviet tanks. One German officer recalled that the Flak Tower had become the backbone of the city's defense. The Zoo Tower alone is said to have fired 400 heavy shells in a single day at Soviet artillery positions around Marzahn. Inside, conditions were horrific. Tens of thousands of civilians, soldiers, and wounded were packed together. Corpses piled up in the hospital wards, while doctors feared stepping outside to bury them. One diarist described the experience as ghostly, with terrified crowds pressing into the narrow stairwells as bombs shook the walls. Still, the towers held out. Even as the city fell, Soviet troops were reluctant to storm them head-on. They finally surrendered only after the rest of Berlin capitulated in early May. An interesting quote comes from Anthony Beevers in Berlin, Downfall 1945. The German anti-aircraft guns on top of the Zoo bunker, 2 kilometers away, had opened up on them. They were forced to take cover again and wait until nightfall. The 8th Guards Army in the southern part of the Tiergarten and the 3rd Shock Army in the north were held back only by fire from the Zoo Flak Tower. And a few pages forward, the 3rd Shock Army had bypassed the immensely powerful Humboldtine Flak Tower, which was left as a target for the heavy artillery and the bombers. Continuing in a clockwise direction, the 5th Shock Army, driving into the eastern districts, bypassed the Friedrichshain bunker. After the war, the Allies faced a problem. These towers were massive, so well built that demolishing them was almost impossible. The British stuffed the Zoo Tower with 25 tons of explosives in 1947, only to watch in shock as the dust cleared and the building was still standing. A reporter dryly quipped, "Made in Germany." It eventually took 40 more tons of explosives to finally bring it down. The Soviets blew up the Friedrichshain towers, while the French only partially destroyed Humboldtine because of nearby rail lines. Today, the ruined shell of Humboldtine still stands in Berlin, overgrown with trees and graffiti, a haunting relic of the Third Reich. In Hamburg and Vienna, other towers survived demolition and have since been reused. One now serves as a music school, another as an energy plant, and one even as a cafe on the roof. The Flak Towers were, in many ways, the perfect symbol of Hitler's Germany. Colossal, over-engineered, terrifying to look at, but ultimately of questionable effectiveness. They tied up huge resources of concrete, steel, and manpower, yet their actual impact on the war was limited. Still, they left behind some of the most unusual fortifications of the 20th century. From protecting civilians and priceless art, to serving as improvised fortresses in the last desperate battle, the Flak Towers remain some of the strangest monuments of the Second World War. Their hulking ruins in Berlin, Hamburg, and Vienna remind us of a time when entire cities became battlegrounds, and when war was fought not only in the skies above, but in the very concrete beneath our feet. This is just a brief overview of the Flak Towers. There were other variations that were less costly and a subject for another video. I highly recommend you all look into the subject. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe, as it'll help the channel to grow. Until next time, my friends, have a great week.